I think it's a great pleasure to be here at GSMA's 5G CXO Summit. I think the theme that you've chosen, 5G Accelerated Digital Transformation, in my mind is very apt. We use the term 5G all the time. We sometimes don't place as much emphasis on the G part, which is the generation. And because with each G or each evolution of a generation, actually the telecoms industry has driven great transformation in the way we live, work, and play, and in many ways transform the world. And that is often understated and under-recognized. So in the 1980s, when 1G first came on the scene, it gave us mobile voice. And for the first time, we were no longer tethered to a wire. And then in the 90s, 2G took us quickly beyond sound. Text came on scene for the very first time. Those of us can still remember the introduction of SMSs and MMSs were extremely revolutionary at that point in time. Then in the 2000s, 3G came along. And for the first time, it gave us the mobile web. We were suddenly now connected to a much larger community at the internet and doing that on the go. It also introduced email and perhaps critically, for good or for bad, work into the mobile space and a series of phones that really supported that use of the phone for work and for enterprise. And then came 4G in the 2010s. It introduced unlimited data and really the advent of the smartphone. And perhaps sometimes it's difficult to wrap our minds around this, but for the first time, people's lives did not revolve around a room, did not revolve around their television, did not revolve around their laptops, but suddenly it revolved around their mobile phones as the computing device. And we have shifted away from the phone as a voice device to a data device. What we take for granted today, real-time streaming, gaming, the constant scrolling of social media, all the way to payment. It really introduced people to the idea of living, working, and playing in that virtual metaverse. So I think as we look at 5G and the telecoms industry has with each generation really transformed the world. There is of course always a sense of hesitation when we're at the cusp of each new generation. If we play the cards right, I think it opens up many new opportunities that will drive the next wave of digital transformation, both the economy, the society, as well as your businesses. Faster speeds is just the baseline, because when you have a speed that rivals what you can get via wired broadband, you can finally cut the cord. You no longer will talk about work from home, but work from anywhere. But we also have to recognize that the real power of 5G is not just about the consumers. The real space is really enterprise growth, which provides significant revenue headroom and resilience. Because if you view 5G just as connectivity, I suspect we may be limiting that value capture. And as a platform, and especially as an enterprise platform, providing services with 5G at its core is perhaps an inflection point to consider how to compete with the very familiar names out there of the much larger platform-driven companies out there. So I think in a nutshell, 5G has the potential to transform businesses, industries, and the entire telco sector. And it is at the forefront of digital transformation. So now sort of looking a little bit at where we are in Singapore, seeing these possibilities, how do we try and support our broader industry to realize that potential? I'll perhaps just share three key thoughts. The first, of course, is the demand that we place on the infrastructure. I think we push for a very aggressive rollout of standalone networks directly instead of doing the interim NSA network deployment. And we awarded our 5G licenses, and I think we're well on track to provide that coverage by 2025. And we're actually in the process of unlocking even more spectrum as we speak to provide that steady growth path for more 5G services going forward. Second, to seed industry demand. Even before we had 5G services, we already set aside approximately US $30 million to develop in parallel use cases or future-ready use cases through test bedding in 6 strategic clusters. And as the 5G network is being rolled out, the next natural step is to commercialize and to facilitate adoption. So lastly, we want to ensure that the 5G networks are secure and resilient. I'll end off with 2 final points to say that to grow the ecosystem, there are perhaps 2 enablers that we need to pay attention to. The first is, of course, people. And in a typical Singaporean fashion, the way we have done it is to bring together the partners from both the demand side, and these are our telcos, vendors, to pool demand for 5G professionals. And concurrently, we've worked with our universities, specifically NUS and Singapore Polytechnic, to provide that direct supply through a telecoms academy to allow that job stack all the way from graduates to polytechnic students to be able to provide that skilled workforce for that 5G transformation. Finally, R&D, because we're looking and setting our sights beyond 5G. We must think ahead for the next bound, not just about today, but into that future that is called 6G. At its core component, it is envisaged to provide and push the boundary for key cutting-edge components and technologies. And to prepare ourselves, we're investing another close to US $50 million to be at the forefront under our Future Communications and Research Development Program. So I think in conclusion, 5G is a key enabler. Every generation has brought about huge transformation. There are indeed challenges, but also huge opportunities in enterprise growth, software, and the platform economy. And I think IMDA, as both a regulator and a promoter, with that unique hat to try and build a broad and resilient and innovative ecosystem for the entire industry.